little contact with the outside world, and used tools and methods that have barely changed over the centuries. Could their way of life harbor its own living relics? Fragments of an ancient time preserved like the mummies themselves. The team sets out to explore a nearby village. Charlotte wants to find out about patterns of health and nutrition, since those leave indelible marks on corpses and skeletons.
Are there any problems, general health problems? Is there any dental disease?
Problems that afflict present-day locals might explain defects found on the mummies and shed light on their way of life.
Colds and flus and just general minor illnesses, but nothing major. Yeah, no. But you can see, like the one woman, she has a thyroid condition.
Yes, I wondered if there was an iodine deficiency in the water.
It turns out the local people enjoy good health, sustained by a balanced diet of cereals, fruit, vegetables, and meat from their livestock. But the condition of the livestock itself prompts an important insight about the past.
Looking at the animals today, their wool is very, very poor quality. And in contrast, the textiles that we found in the burials are made from very, very fine quality wool. So that would indicate to me that they had trade with nomadic people who were living in the Tian Shan, who were in an environment that would produce a very fine quality wool.
Today's farmers do in fact buy wool, meat, and timber from herders who live high in the mountains. Could this pattern date back to the mummy people?
I believe that the mummy people must have had similar contact with ancient nomadic herders to weave such fine textiles.
There's a lot about this cart that looks like very ancient remains that we found.
The ways of the living echo those of the past. The mummy people, like the people of the Russian steppes to the north and the west, used donkey carts similar to those found here today.
There's a piece of wood in one of the burials. It's almost identical with these pieces here.
The changeless nature of their design is revealed by these artifacts found in their graves. The mummy people used the wheel long before it was known in China, and may have played a role in introducing it to Chinese civilization. In another reflection of the past, fir trees from the Tian Shan Mountains are used to fashion vessels and boards, like those the local women use for bread making.
When we were working at Wupu at the graveyard, we found a similar bowl, smaller in size, but made with the identical techniques.
Even the curved bread resembles the ancient loaf, similarly baked on the oven wall.
In some ways, when you go into the modern village of Wupu, you feel like you're entering into the ancient period in which when you look at the artifacts, you feel like you're recapitulating that. There's so many similarities.
But the scholars need to set their gaze beyond the village to explore the interdependence of local farmers and mounted nomadic herdsmen. After centuries of self-sufficiency, the mummy people grew increasingly reliant on goods provided by nomads, who found in the higher reaches of the Tian Shan Mountains pastures rich enough to raise high-quality livestock. Until recently, this area was off-limits to foreigners, and the visitors were not prepared for what they saw.
Much to our utter surprise, we found magnificent grasslands that are so immense it boggles the mind, and they go very high. One could not possibly take advantage of this territory without having had a horse. There's no doubt that horseback riding had a great impact upon the expansion and occupation of the territory in this region.
But could horseback riding have reached these parts centuries before it was known in China? Victor's friend, archaeologist Luin Gua, is a leading expert on the ancient nomads. His spectacular finds are revealing the nomads were expert riders as early as 800 BC.
The 4th century BC horse saddle that we found doesn't have any metal or wood on it. It's upholstered, as you can see, white leather. It's as far as we know, it's one of the earliest saddles in the world that's so perfectly preserved. We can see that it's been mended here, patched up. It has beautiful bone fittings on the edges to tie the straps on.
And at the back here.
And the bridle and the bit, things like this, we found a lot from those 7th and 6th century Qäwrighul burials. Yeah.
The bit at the bottom. I've got the headband up here.
The cheek pieces are wooden sticks. The snaffle bit is made of iron. And we have the leather straps, the bridle.
And this is the rein.
And this rope.
And the rope must be for tethering the animal.
It's just like it's brand new. It's still very flexible. It could take a lot of weight. The introduction of horseback riding to this region meant that the people had vastly increased mobility. That means that they could take advantage of more distant pastures. They could move their yurts, their houses to farther away. That means the pastures that they could utilize were vastly extended.
To survive the bitter winters high up in the mountains, the nomads relied on extremely well-insulated but portable homes called yurts.
This is the flap that covers the door of the yurt, and it's done with felt, and it's quilted to make it much firmer because the felt otherwise, with all wear and tear, would pull apart. And then it's edged with a nice braided wool edging. And down at the bottom is this nice woven band. It goes around the complete circumference to hold the felt in place. We've seen all of these techniques in the mummies. We've seen the braided bands, we've seen the quilted band, and the felt. All of this was influenced from the nomadic people down to the lowland sedentary people.
The yurt and its occupants' way of life have changed little in 2,000 years.
I'm interested to know what kind of diet they have. What do they have in their normal diet?
Very, almost no vegetables, mostly milk products.
And we see some of them on the table here, don't we? Yeah.
And some meat, a bit of meat.
Does their diet vary?
Charlotte learns that this family of nomads exchanges meat and wool for grain, which they add to their own food products. Without this carbohydrate supplement, they would suffer from crippling malnutrition. If the ancient nomad population was healthy, they too must have traded with outsiders for grain.
They don't have many illnesses. They just big flus, colds, that sort of thing. They have 500 sheep and goats, 500 sheep, 100 cattle, and 80 horses.
But exactly who were the nomads? And where did they come from? Archaeologist Luin Gua suggests they try to locate a mysterious site dating from the time of the ancient nomads. Perhaps it will yield some clues.
Oh, God, amazing. Look at that.
Oh, look at those.
A colossal rock face, covered with elaborate engravings.
This mountain is a perfect setting for a reproductive fertility rite ceremony. There's a lot of grass here. It's very lush, and the mountain itself is so grand that it's natural that people would want to come here and have ceremonies.
I see females performing a very ritual dance, and some of them even falling into ecstasy during the dance time. And the copulation between the male and the female are prominent in these scenes.
These 3,000-year-old dancing women with their narrow waists and stylized gestures are nearly identical to figures found in Bulgaria and in the Ukraine, dated to about 1,000 years earlier. There, too, the dancers celebrate fertility and reproduction. These figures have large noses, long faces, and round eyes. The nomads are thought to have Iranian origins. Here, their Western roots are literally carved in stone. Eager to establish if the nomads traded for grain with the mummy people, Charlotte and Lou try to figure out how well the ancient herdsmen ate by studying their skeletal remains.
In a healthy human body, this bit of the pelvis should be separate from the sacrum and able to move freely. But this half is fused.
I suspect this is probably due to injury. And again, this may well be related to their lifestyle, maybe to horse riding. On the back of the mandible, you'll see a very large hole there, which indicates that the bone has got infected inside. The pressure's built up, and it's forced it with the pus that's formed inside the bone. Exposes the pulp cavity, the centre of the tooth, which you can see there. The infection, an infection gets into the roots of the teeth and causes destruction of the bone. Suggested this is associated with walking up and down steep mountainsides, being in the hills a lot. I don't see much evidence in the nomadic skeletons I've looked at of nutritional deficiencies, so therefore they must have been getting additions to their main part of the diet from a source, and that's probably from the agriculturalists, and they would have been trading their animals for things like grain, fruit and vegetables.
It now seems certain that the nomads bartered with the mummy people for food. But it turns out they became far more enterprising, wide-ranging traders. Their graves contain such items as a 3,000-year-old makeup stick and numerous bronze objects made hundreds of miles away.
We have evidence of long-distance trade across the mountains and steppes. So we have bronze knives, which show a very strong affinity with the steppe nomads on the northern side of the Tian Shan and clear as far north as southern Siberia.
At the time bronze was spreading eastward, the Chinese recorded their first descriptions of European-looking nomads.
They say that they had red hair, bluish green eyes, and they looked like monkeys, and long noses. They had long noses, and they looked like monkeys. Hairy all over. A bow and some arrows.
Later nomad finds include artifacts that were not intended for sale.
You could still use this.
These swift riders became masters of archery, ready to trade in violence when it suited their interests.
Very powerful.
Before long, the threat of their powerful serpentine bows would profoundly affect the course of Chinese history.
There are several kinds of arrows. This one has an iron.
The bow was found during Lu's most recent excavations, which have yielded many spectacular finds dating to about 300 BC.